How do we balance a crappy tenant versus an empty room, and how risky it is if you don't get the balance right? Hello everybody, I thought I'll cover today one of the critical factors of success when operating a rooming house. We're here in this beautiful property that we just started operating. In fact, we had council inspection today, which means this property will officially start operating pretty shortly. As we reflected over certain things that are happening in some of the properties that our owners have been operating for a while, we thought we'll share with you one critical success factor to make sure that your property not only provides a result that it was always intended to provide, but also it doesn't turn into a massive nightmare. And that is how we balance the need to get rooms rented, to make sure that they're not empty, to minimize vacancy, to maximize the financial return of this property, with the fact that you just don't want a whole bunch of crappy tenants, because obviously if we end up with a whole bunch of crappy tenants, that will not only turn into a big headache pretty much immediately, but also will reduce the financial returns of the property overall. And it's a hard point to balance, and it's actually something that we've seen different operators out there manage very, very differently. We've seen operators who try to maximize the rent price, the rent number, charge the highest rent they can, but of course there's a little bit of a curve through the process of operating a rooming house. The more you charge, the less people are willing to pay that price. And of course, there's always people who are either desperate or who cannot be accepted in some of the other properties, and therefore those people are happy to pay more. But the question is, why are they happy to pay more? And are they the right quality tenants? At the same time, the reverse happens, which is when we have really high quality tenants who have good jobs and good history and will take care of the property and stay for longer, those tenants have options. Those tenants can rent a lot of properties out there. Even though they can't exactly pick and choose necessarily, they do have more options. Therefore, they're going to tend to pick the highest quality property they can. So that's the first factor. The first factor is you need to balance the price of the rent versus the quality of the tenant. The second thing that needs to be balanced is how quickly you want rooms to be rented versus the quality of the tenant. And I guess you'll see here a little bit of a pattern where it all relies on the quality of the tenant. You can have the house full, you can have the house full maybe at a higher price or even at a lower price, but you'll have to accept crappy tenants. And that's something we definitely don't want. We don't want someone who will turn into a headache long term. We don't want someone who will ultimately wreck the property or create all sorts of damage and then impact the long-term viability of the property, impact the long-term result, both financially and otherwise, of the property. So that's the way we balance it. Unfortunately, there's not a specific formula. If you have any questions, feel free to kind of post them below or contact us. We're more than happy to tell you a little bit about how the whole thing works. But the reality is there's a subtle line that we apply as we receive applications and on a case-by-case basis to check whether the tenant that we're potentially about to approve and that we are about to let move into one of our properties, whether that tenant is of the right quality, has the right income, has the right references, and the right history to make sure that they are a good fit for the properties we operate. Unfortunately, that process takes a little bit of time, which means that there's a price to pay for that. There is a price to pay in terms of waiting a little bit longer, in terms of having a little bit more, when a vacancy occurs, having a little bit more time to process those applications, but eventually we get the right quality tenant. And overall, we believe that financially we get a much better number, a much better return for the property and for the average room. That's all I have today. If you have any questions, feel free to post them below or reach out. We're more than happy to talk to you about the details of this particular issue. Feel free to let us know. And of course, we'll talk to many of you very, very soon.